Again, thanks for coming out. I want to introduce our next speaker. He's someone who has decided to run for office as a Libertarian. He's one of the candidates seeking the Libertarian Party's nomination to be our candidate for president. He's from Oklahoma. His name is R.J. Harris. So let me turn it over to R.J. Harris.
My name is RJ, and I'm come here from Oklahoma to say that I am the Libertarian Party candidate for the 2012 United States presidential nomination. And I'd like to ask all of you to please wake up and fight for liberty. It's time to wake up and fight for liberty. And that's what I've come here to ask you all today. This weekend, we remember our fellow citizens who were killed tomorrow, 10 years ago. Today we remember those people and the enemies of freedom that killed them. And I say enemies because ever since that day, more and more of our freedom and liberty has been taken away for the false trade of government-provided security. But if our founders were alive today, if they were here today, they would say that our security is our personal responsibility. That's what they would say. They would tell all of us to stop looking to our government to provide us with that sense of security or for our individual security. And I'm going to ask you to do the same. It's on us. It's our responsibility. Now, with that in mind, we have been convinced by our government to go ahead and lay down for the kind of things that we've seen recently from the TSA. Men of the Republic, I ask you, since when did it become okay to allow our mothers, wives, and daughters to be sexually assaulted and photographed naked in public? When? That is not allowed, that should not be allowed, and we should stand up and say, we've had enough and we're not going to take that anymore. That's what our founders would tell us to do, and they'd be ashamed if they saw us not doing it. So ladies and gentlemen, I also say that there's a lot of people out there in the mainstream media that will look at me and say, okay, RJ, what is your plan then to provide domestic security and security from international terrorism? And I would like to say to you that we've proven time and time again that what's most important is to provide for the common defense of the United States and for the individuals to provide for their own security. And we have seen that work for over 300 years. And it wasn't until this one fateful event that more and more of us were convinced to leave that behind. And having spent the last year in Afghanistan, I'm here to report to you today that the way that we continue to defend ourselves is not by continuing to put conventional forces on the ground in foreign countries all over the world. And it's not by continuing to try to use military forces to police populations when our founders knew that that was not okay. And yet it's not okay here in the United States, but then our government wants to tell us and try to do it in other countries. That's not okay. And it's not working, folks. In Afghanistan, the Afghan National Army continues to not be able to reform, which forces the United States military to do more and more of the heavy lifting. And of course, this creates an animosity between our people and their people, and we shouldn't be their nation builder. We should only be providing for our common defense of the Republic. And as we have seen, that is not accomplished with tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers on the ground making targets of themselves. That is not accomplished that way. Our founders argued that our maritime, our Navy, and our Marine Corps would be well suited to protect us both as an outer and inner defense. Which is why I'm here to tell you today that when I'm president, I will return all Army and Air Forces back to the United States and back to the militia and the National Guard from which they came. When I am President of the United States, I will restore the National Guard and our militia to their status as our homeland defenders. A recent question was posed to Ron Paul at the debates because the media likes to try to point out, try to force FEMA onto us and talk to Libertarians and say, oh, woe is us, what will we do without FEMA? What will we do without the federal government there to protect us in a national disaster? And I wish I could have been there to say that if our National Guard and our militia was not over in other countries trying to fight wars, expeditionary wars, if it was here, where it's supposed to be, like it has been for 300 years, they can protect us in times of national emergency and national disaster. Instead, more and more of them are deployed, as I just learned firsthand. More and more of their equipment is not prepared and ready to go when things like Hurricane Irene come along, the flooding comes along, and the National Guard that we count on, that we should be able to count on, which constitutionally is who we're supposed to be able to count on, not FEMA. If you look at your Constitution, folks, you will not see the words FEMA. There is no such thing there. It's our militia and our National Guard that appear there to provide for our common defense and our security in times of national disaster and distress. So they need to be brought home. Also, folks, if you look at your Constitution, you will not see things like the Federal Department of Education, as it's an individual welfare supposed to be provided by all of us. You will not see things like the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, and on and on and on and on and on. You will not see all those things. Where do they come from? Unfortunately, over the last 100 years, we've been convinced that it's only government that can provide these services, when we know better. Nothing other than the free market can provide your individual welfare better than you can. And so I'm here to point out today and remind us that we can begin to provide our own individual welfare. We can look to our communities. We do not have to keep expecting our federal government to take care of us all the time and sell our votes to those congressmen and executive candidates who will simply promise you the moon and expect your vote in return. I'm asking all of you to go out in your communities and remind your friends and neighbors of this. Remind them of what it could be like if we were to stop some of these programs. A lot of times I'm asked, okay, well, RJ, you're talking about bringing home the National Guard and the active duty Army and Air Force. You're talking about bringing all of them home and putting them back into the economy and putting them back into a workforce that's already depressed by what we now see as a second depression upon us. Okay? But also there's another thing that I'd like to point out. Another thing that you won't find in the Constitution is this war on drugs. Right now, or excuse me, back in the 20s, the progressive socialists of that era at least had the common decency to pass a constitutional amendment to infringe upon your individual liberty and your property to take those things away. But we saw how horrible that was and how it wasn't working, so it's the only amendment to ever be repealed. And yet here we are today with a 40-year drug war. A 40-year drug war that has taken people away from their families, stolen their property, thrown them in jail, and killed them even. And you won't find any of that in the Constitution either. And yet, today, all of that is carried out without a constitutional amendment. It's carried out by fiat of our elected government. That should not continue, folks. And so that's another thing that I'd like to say today is on the first day of R.J. Harris's presidency, on the very first day, I will pardon every single citizen and emancipate them who has ever been arrested or convicted for use, possession, or distribution of any substance. That same will apply to anyone who's ever been arrested for nothing more and locked up for nothing more than the exercise of their right to keep and bear arms. Those people will be pardoned. So folks, I have been asked, you're going to bring back the military from around the world. economy. You're going to bring back, you're going to pardon all these people who have been thrown into jail quite unconstitutionally. And you're going to put them back in the economy. And I say, imagine the end of socialism. Imagine an end to $3 trillion wars that we should have never been paying for out of our economy in the first place. Imagine an end to $1 trillion drug war that we should never have been paying for in the first place. And imagine an end to the mountains and mountains of socialism that we have to bear on our economy, that our economy has to pay for. And with those things eliminated, and the consolidation and elimination of unconstitutional federal agencies, folks, we can go ahead and bring these people back, emancipate them, give them their liberty back, give them their freedom back, and still continue to grow this economy. Now before I let y'all go, we're going to have some more entertainment come out. And before I let you go, I just want to address this here also. Like a lot of you, I'm very impressed and pulling for my colleague Ron Paul in the GOP primaries. I'm sure you all are as well. I want y'all to know that I'm not running directly against Ron Paul. We all know what a good job he's doing over there. We're pulling for him. We're hoping that he does well. But we also know that we cannot sit back like we did 8 years, or back in 2008, and wait to see what happens in the outcome of that race. We have to be prepared with a liberty candidate who has proven their ability to articulate the message of liberty. We have to be prepared with a liberty candidate that can step in case Ron doesn't make it through. So I'm speaking directly to all of the libertarians in the room, the registered libertarian, and all of those of you that have already given $2,500 or more, maxed out to the Paul campaign. When you go home today, please get on your computers. Look up my website, rjharris2012.com. Spread that word around, make the most generous donation you can to the RJ Harris 2012 campaign, and together we can restore freedom, individual liberty, our Constitution, and our Republic. Thank you.